Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're going to be cutting through all the noise that surrounds creative success. The metrics, the awards, the fame, and we're going straight to the source. We're really embarking on a journey that's, well, it's less about external production and much more about achieving a state of internal flow, a state where creation feels less like a struggle and a lot more like breathing. Our sources for this are just fascinating. We're drawing from a series of, I would call them philosophical, almost spiritual reflections, and they're compiled by a world-renowned music producer and an author. And these two have spent years just unpacking the mechanics of inspiration itself. They're also very transparent about their material. These are not, scientific facts. They're more like a collection of distilled impressions, thoughts designed to resonate with you, the listener, and really invite a deeper exploration into your own process. So our mission really is to synthesize this whole creative philosophy into actionable mindsets. We're trying to find the key to accessing what the American painter Robert Henri called that marvelous state where art becomes inevitable. And that quote, it's cited in our source material, and it just perfectly encapsulates our goal. We're not just trying to make great things. We're trying to inhabit a state where great work has to flow out of us naturally.
Which demands a complete transformation of how we even view the word artist.
Right.
To start, the source is just. They challenge the very idea that artist is a title that's reserved for a special, gifted few. We've culturally built this whole pedestal for creators, the solitary genius, the tortured soul. But the authors, they insist that creativity is a fundamental human birthright. It's something possessed by every single person.
That's the shockwave that hits you right away, isn't it? We so often compartmentalize creativity. We say, oh, I'm creative at work, but not at home, or I'm creative, but I can't paint.
Exactly. And a source just destroys that limitation. Their definition of creating is simply bringing something into the world that wasn't there before.
That simple.
That simple. And this definition just vastly expands the scope. It means your morning commute qualifies. If you creatively find a new solution to avoid traffic. It means the precise arrangement of flowers you put on your table. It's the way you rearrange furniture to maximize light, or the way you pull together information in a conversation to solve a problem with someone.
So it completely redefines success. The creative act doesn't need to be witnessed or recorded or sold or even validated by the market to count.
Not at all. The greatest act of creation in this philosophy happens internally.
Okay.
Exactly. I mean, in a really profound existential sense, simply by existing, we are all creators. Our minds are constantly generating our internal reality. The external world, it just presents us with undifferentiated matter, raw light, raw sound, raw energy.
And we make sense of it.
Our senses extract that information, and then through this complex series of electrical and chemical reactions in our brains, we generate the cohesive sensory reality that we experience moment to moment.
We create the forests and the seas, the heat, the cold. We interpret words and voices and emotions, and then instantly we generate a response, a thought, an idea, a reaction.
Yes. We are living as artists, whether we realize it or not. We're perceiving, filtering, and administering our own experiences based on this constant flow. It's a continuous, moment-to-moment act of self-creation.
So living as an artist it's fundamentally a way of being in the world.
It's a practice of paying deep attention and constantly refining your sensitivity to everything around you, and not just, waiting for the next big project to land on your desk.
And this leads us right into the core mechanism, right? How this universal energy flows through us, and maybe more importantly, why it so often gets blocked.
Okay, yeah. Let's unpack this. The interplay between what they call the source, the filter, and the vessel.
The vessel.
We process that immense reality through what the sources call the vasiya, or the vessel. And this vessel, it holds the sum total of our filtered thoughts, our feelings, our dreams, all our accumulated experiences of the world. But here's the critical part. Information doesn't just flow into the vessel unfiltered.
No.
Each of us has a unique set of sensory and psychological filters.
And that filtering it's necessary for sanity, right? Our minds literally can't handle the immense data flow of reality.
Precisely. We'd be completely overwhelmed if every single wavelength of light, every nuance of sound, every signal hit our consciousness equally. We'd be paralyzed.
Sure.
So really early in life, we learn to focus on information that's immediately essential for survival. The dangerous shadow, the warm fire, the clear voice, and we disconnect from everything else. It's an evolutionary necessity.
But for the artist, that same filter is a double-edged sword.
Absolutely.
Well,
while it's essential for survival, this filtering inevitably reduces the intelligence of the source. We aren't getting the raw universal data. We're interpreting it, editing it, and often, shoehorning it into existing mental categories.
Hmm.
As the vessel fills up, we construct these established stories and limiting beliefs about ourselves, about the world, about what's possible. And this becomes our restrictive picture of the world.
So that's the real challenge then. The filter starts for safety, but it hardens into dogma.
It does. The artist's work isn't necessarily to destroy the filter, we can't, but to avoid rigidly clinging to those stories. The true creative act is in finding ways to open space in the vessel, to allow for that immense flow of information and intuition that just doesn't fit our current logical system.
I like that.
And the sources stress this idea with such power. Whatever medium you use, paint, words, music, the true instrument is you. It's through your openness that the universe gets to define itself anew.
And this connects directly to the spiritual component of creation, doesn't it? The push toward what they call the invisible realm. We often think that the point of art is just to create tangible objects, the novel, the album, the vase.
But the physical work is always just a consequence. It's a consequence of a deeper primal desire. We create because the act itself is an attempt to enter a mysterious realm, a portal to the invisible world. It's a yearning to transcend the everyday, the measurable, the logical. The source notes that the world of reason, while you need it for building bridges, tends to be narrow and full of dead ends for creation. But the spiritual viewpoint, which they define simply as connection or, a belief in magic, is boundless and offers truly marvelous possibilities.
So whether you use religious language or not, the key is just acknowledging that the ideas we believe in, especially the ones we can't prove, have immense energy. So how do we start channeling that high-frequency energy?
We have to first see ourselves as antennas of creative thought. Some signals are obvious, like a clear melody in your head. Others are really subtle, like a sudden intuition about a character's motivation.
Right.
These highest frequency signals are energetic, not tangible. They're perceived through intuition, not the five senses. And capturing this elusive energy is hard precisely because it defies the logic of that filter we were just talking about.
So it's counterintuitive, but the advice is don't hunt for the signal, and definitely don't try to analyze it while it's arriving.
Absolutely. The secret is creating a cleared space in the mind, a vacuum. Our minds are chronically oversaturated with self-talk, with worry, with planning. If we can just momentarily silence that internal interference, we create a void that's capable of absorbing the universal ideas that are available to us.
So it's a passive act, but a very committed one.
Exactly. By reducing the interference from our ego and just focusing on being present, we become more harmonious with the subtle rhythms of the environment, which makes us better receptors.
And to access this information, the source encourages actively seeking clues and embracing chance, because the material we need it's woven into everything. Nature, conversations, art, they offer a really powerful exercise for this.
This is the detailed anecdote about the random book. The exercise is simple. You open a book at random and you apply the first sentence you see to whatever situation you're facing, entertaining the possibility that, as they put it, casualty might not be the only factor in play.
And the author shares this striking, almost unbelievable story about using this during a real crisis. They had a burst appendix, and the doctor was adamant that it needed to be removed immediately.
Yeah.
But feeling uncertain, the author walked past a bookstore, felt this pull to go inside, picked up a book by Dr. Andrew Weil, and just let it fall open to a random page.
And the paragraph their eyes landed on had advice specifically about organs. It said something like, if a doctor wants to remove a part of your body and says it has no function, don't believe it.
Wow.
And the author took this as the sign they needed, questioned the procedure, and ultimately kept the organ. It's such a high-stakes, dramatic example, but it forces you to consider that what we dismiss as just randomness might actually be a signal we're subconsciously primed to receive, especially when we intentionally open ourselves up to that kind of non-rational input.
And so often, we overlook the most immediate place where clues are hidden, our own inner landscape. There's this common misconception that to create great art, you need to live this extraordinary external life full of travel and wild adventures.
But the richness of our internal world is often just neglected. Many artists connect with something beyond their ego by accessing the unconscious mind. The sources note these historical accounts of artists who created their best work in unusual states, like while running a high fever, sometimes close to 40 degrees Celsius,
So these trance states kind of bypass the thinking, critical brain.
and grant access to a purer, dreamlike creative stream.
Yeah. And speaking of dreams, they draw a parallel with Tibetan dream yoga. which holds that dreams are just as real or unreal as being awake. They're just a different kind of reality that we inhabit.
So how do you mine that?
The most practical way is the discipline of keeping a dream journal. The practice requires having a pen and notebook right by the bed and committing to writing immediately when you wake up. You have to capture the dream with as much detail as possible before you do anything else.
And the key is to minimize movement.
Right. They warn that even the simple act of turning your head can dislodge that fragile memory. That's fascinating. It sounds less like passive journaling and more like an active physical commitment to memory recall.
It is. This commitment and the practice of setting the intention to remember your dreams before you fall asleep strengthens your recall capacity over time. It's like training an unconscious muscle.
I see.
And they also note that tools that leverage apparent randomness, like consulting the I Ching, serve a similar purpose. They bypass the conscious mind and potentially connect us to a greater intelligence, effectively serving as an engine of creation.
So the core takeaway from this first segment is that by intentionally expanding the capacity of the vessel to receive unfiltered material, and by setting aside our limiting beliefs, we move closer to our nature and tap into that primordial wisdom.
Precisely. We tune the antenna.
Okay, so we've talked about tuning the antenna and accessing the source, but what happens when the signal comes through and now we have to actually build something? Let's shift from the philosophical to the practical stages of making the art itself. The source describes it as having 3 crucial sequential phases, but before we dive into the phases, we have to acknowledge the level of dedication this requires, what they call the 204/7 artist. The artist, according to this philosophy, is constantly on duty, engaged on 2 simultaneous fronts, the work of doing and the work of being.
Right. And the work of doing is the visible part, the time at the keyboard, in the studio, at the easel.
But the work of being, that's the silent commitment.
It is. It means constantly remaining open, listening, perceiving connections in the world, seeking beauty in the mundane, and capturing those fleeting thoughts at any moment of the day.
So if you're not comfortable with that level of dedication where creativity becomes a mode of existence, not just an occupation you clock in for, then this path, according to the source, might not yield its deepest rewards.
Yeah, it requires this paradoxical balance. You have to always be seeking new seeds, new connections, even while you're deep in finishing a current project. You have to be ready to stop whatever you're doing, even cooking dinner, to jot down a sudden thought.
That constant vigilance is what fuels phase 1, seeds and experimentation.
This is the playful germinal stage, where quantity and diversity matter so much more than quality. You have to be totally open, just accumulating seeds, potential starting points, without comparing them, without criticizing them, or trying to logically decide which one is the best.
And a seed could be anything. A phrase that sounds intriguing, a quick rhythm idea, a color combination, a character's internal conflict. The point is just to explore as many worlds as possible for the idea.
And the goal of this experimentation is not to fulfill an expectation. The goal is to be surprised. We have to welcome the unexpected conclusions that arise when we just follow the process without judgment. The sources highlight some great historical examples of accidental invention to prove this.
Right.
Ancient Chinese alchemists were trying to find the elixir of immortality when they accidentally mixed potassium nitrate, sulfur, and coal, and discovered gunpowder instead.
Think about the weight of that. They missed their goal, immortality, but they changed the course of human history.
And we know this pattern is pervasive. Penicillin, plastic, the pacemaker, Post-it notes, they were all born from accidental discoveries.
Which is a powerful cautionary tale for the creator.
It is. If you're too narrowly focused on a preconceived goal, you might walk right past a world-changing revelation that's staring you in the face just because it doesn't fit your current framework. You have to allow yourself to be surprised by your own work.
So when it's time to choose a path from all those seeds you've gathered, the source advises against mental analysis. Instead, you should follow what moves you internally, what maintains your genuine interest, even if the idea feels less robust than some other option with clear potential.
Right. That inner reaction is the true fuel that will sustain you on the long, difficult journey ahead. Which brings us to the crucial maxim for phase 1. Probulo, toto, try it all.
I love that.
In the linear world, mixing blue and yellow predictably makes green. In the creative process, the sum of the parts defies expectations. Ideas that seem brilliant in your mind might fall completely flat in reality, and ideas that seem silly or even horrible at the outset might be exactly what the work needs.
So rejecting an idea just based on a mental preconception because it doesn't fit your style or you think it's too risky does a terrible disservice to the work.
The only way to truly know if an idea works is to physically manifest it. The advice is to ask copious what-if questions. What if this scene were told entirely in dialogue? What if I suppressed all the adjectives? What if the music were played at the extreme opposite tempo?
And this necessity of physical trial is even more important in collaboration, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. Instead of sitting around debating different solutions verbally, where language and interpretation inevitably fail to capture the idea's true form, you have to take the ideas out of the verbal realm and manifest them physically. Model them, sketch them, record a rough version, act them out. Only then can you genuinely assess the true energy of the idea.
So after this playful, open phase of generation, when we've chosen a direction based on what truly excites us, we inevitably enter phase two, construction. This is where the inspiration often feels like it just dies.
This phase is, without a doubt, the least glamorous and the most difficult to endure. The rush of exploration is gone, replaced by painstaking masonry work. You shift from an open field of possibility to standing at the base of a 100-story spiral staircase. It's a long, precarious ascent. The initial excitement is gone, and the creator is so tempted to turn back, abandon the hard work, and just chase the thrill of a new, easier idea from phase one.
But the first two phases have little meaning on their own. The art only truly exists, and the artist only truly evolves, if the work is finished and released. The source really emphasizes that the goal here is enduring the long haul.
And the construction phase is often defined not by building up, but by destruction or
Yeah.
pruning. Development is rarely about adding more details. It's about removing the dispensable ones to focus energy on the core elements.
Right.
The goal is brutal editing until the essence is reached. The source uses that famous observation by Antoine de Saint-Exupéry, which serves as the mantra for this phase. Perfection is achieved not when there is nothing more to add, but when there is nothing more to remove.
This phase is also where the dreaded vision gap paralyzes us. We might hear a sublime orchestral arrangement in our mind, but our technical skills can only manage a simple melody.
Or we visualize these elegant dance moves that our bodies simply can't execute. It's incredibly easy to get discouraged here and to confuse the failure of execution with the project's true potential. We can't let the scope of our idealized imagination prevent us from realizing a more practical, achievable version of the project. And here's the surprising insight. That resulting practical version might actually be far superior to the initial abstract concept because the necessary constraints of reality force clarity and focus.
And when you inevitably hit a wall in the middle of all this masonry work, the key is maintaining momentum. If you get blocked on a central, difficult part, a key chapter, a difficult bridge in a song, the instinct is to just grind away at it.
But the source advises you to circumvent it. Move past the sticky section and finish the other, less demanding parts of the draft. This has huge psychological and practical benefits.
I can see that.
First, the solutions to those difficult parts often reveal themselves once the general context has emerged. It's so much easier to build a bridge when you can actually see the other side you're connecting to.
Right.
And second, when you return to that difficult part, knowing that only 5 or 10% of the project is left to complete. That provides an enormous psychological motivation. It's like placing the last piece of a puzzle. It's easy when the full picture is visible.
So if there is one sacred rule in this entire creative philosophy, it's the constant need for patience during this construction phase.
Impatience is described so beautifully as arguing with reality. It's this yearning for something different than what's happening now, wishing time would speed up or that skill would arrive instantly. But we fundamentally don't control the time or the natural rhythms of development. And the paradoxical result of trying to rush things is that it ends up consuming more time and energy, making it a wasted effort. Patience, instead, requires accepting the pace of what is and just trusting the rhythms of development, knowing the project will emerge when it's ready.
Okay, so once the painstaking masonry work is done, we move into phase 3, finalization.
In this final stage, we stop the open-ended discovery and the heavy structural work. We focus solely on polishing the expression for the world. The sense of culmination arrives not with a fanfare, but intuitively. A quiet certainty that the essence resonates clearly and that there's literally nothing left to add or remove.
The source offers some important guidance on timing here, particularly with the deadline paradox. They advise against deadlines in the early exploratory phases because they impose restrictive pressure. But a fixed deadline in the final stage can be a helpful external constraint to ensure the work actually gets finished.
Right. Art isn't created against the clock, but it can be finalized against the clock.
And we also have to actively avoid what they call maquettitis or demoitis.
Yes. Unless you are actively working to improve the piece, You should avoid listening to, reading, or sharing the unfinished work.
I want to focus on that psychological trap for a moment. Why does the brain cement that initial version, even if it's not optimal, if we keep consuming it?
It's rooted in psychological comfort and the effort required for change. That first version, the demo, represents the path of least resistance.
Mm.
If you repeatedly consume it, your brain accepts that initial version as the established model, which immediately prevents the project from growing and developing into its ultimate form.
So you need that space.
You do. Because sometimes a 5-minute sketch or a spontaneous first draft is the purest, best version. But we only realize that after stepping away for a bit and allowing our perception to reset.
And the final psychological resistance often shows up as the fear of permanence, a kind of commitment phobia to the finished piece.
Oh yes, we invent these elaborate excuses to postpone completion, suddenly finding non-existent defects, or chasing the mirage of a better option we haven't discovered yet, or a sudden loss of faith in the whole concept.
Right.
This perpetual tweaking just blocks subsequent creations from seeing the light. We need to remember that every new project is simply another page in the journal of our inner life. The goal is to develop the essential habit of finishing, sharing it, and immediately moving on. That discipline is what builds self-confidence and reduces the paralyzing power of insecurity.
And that transition takes us right into the mindset tools that help clear those psychological barriers and foster radical originality, starting with an absolute refusal to be defined by what came before.
We've moved from the structure of creation to the psychology of the creator, and the source makes such a powerful case for embracing the beginner's mind, la mente del principiante. The classic example here, used in the text, is the story of AlphaGo defeating the world Go champion.
Go is the ultimate strategy game. I mean, an ancient and beautiful art form. They say there are more possible configurations on the board than atoms in the universe. For decades, it was seen as the holy grail of AI because conventional processing just couldn't handle the complexity.
Right. So AlphaGo, the Google DeepMind AI, was designed to learn from scratch, just playing against itself over and over, thousands of times a day, perfecting the mechanics. In the crucial second game against Lee Sedol, the reigning world champion, the machine reached a point where experts expected one of two moves: A, an aggressive move, or B, a solid defensive one. But AlphaGo chose a third move, move 37.
And this wasn't just unexpected, it was unprecedented.
Exactly. Yeah. Move 37 was one that no expert player in 3,000 years of recorded Go history had ever considered viable. The commentary team was just stunned. They noted no human player would have opted for move 37.
Wow.
The human champion was so perplexed by the move's counterintuitive positioning that he physically left the room. He was clearly agitated, and the machine eventually won the game and the tournament.
The revelation there is the power of purity in the creative act. The machine succeeded not because it was infinitely smarter than the human mind, but because it learned the game only by following the core rules, completely ignoring 3,000 years of cultural conventions, established traditions, and the limiting beliefs of human experts.
It proves that human understanding was fundamentally flawed, and this suggests there's tremendous power in not knowing. The source states that not knowing holds great power. If we approach a challenging task from a place of ignorance, a blank slate, the heavy barrier of existing knowledge that often blocks us just disappears. Ignorance allows innovation to seep into the cracks.
The Ramones are a perfect non-digital example of this, right? They approached music with this startling innocence, believing they were making easy-listening pop. Their singular, stripped-down version of rock and roll was innovation through ignorance. They unintentionally invented punk rock and started a musical revolution.
And that's it. Experience brings wisdom, yes, but it simultaneously attenuates the power of ingenuity by pushing us toward proven patterns and away from the innocence that allows for those revolutionary breakthroughs. We have to cultivate the beginner's mind, even when we are experts.
Another crucial mindset tool for fostering originality is the power of constraints, or intentionally imposing what they call temporary rules, or reglas provisionales.
When options are limited, the space for obvious solutions shrinks, forcing the creative brain to be specific and ingenious. This often leads to completely novel outcomes that you wouldn't have achieved with unlimited resources.
The sources cite some marvelous examples here. The French author Georges Perec wrote an entire celebrated book called La Disparition, the Disappearance, without using the letter E.
Which is an immense constraint, given that E is the most common letter in the French alphabet. It forced entirely new syntactic structures and a profoundly original vocabulary.
Right.
The painter Yves Klein limited his palette to a single, deep ultramarine color, which led not only to his famous monochromatic canvases, but to the discovery of a completely new shade, International Klein Blue, which became a form of art in itself.
And then there's the famous Dogma 95 movement in film, created by Lars von Trier and others.
Dogma 95 established 10 extremely restrictive temporary rules, a vow of chastity, to strip away the artificiality of modern cinema. They banned all genre films, required only handheld cameras, demanded only natural light, and insisted on only sound recorded on site. And these constraints, which seemed directly counterintuitive to creative freedom, spurred immediate critical success. The first official Dogma film, Festin, won a special jury prize at Cannes.
The lesson here is that while the rules of baseball are rarely altered, artists have the luxury of creating a new set of rules every time they play.
And since all constraints are temporary and breakable, the exercise is to constantly examine your methods and consider the extreme opposite. If you tend to write short, punchy scenes, try the longest, most drawn-out scene possible. If you design with minimal color, try using the brightest, most distracting palette you can find.
So this polarity, looking at the light side of your darkness and the dark side of your light, it reveals your current creative position and instantly expands your possibilities.
Exactly. Even if you don't adopt the opposite extreme, just understanding the boundary influences every decision you make.
Moving on to managing professional relationships, the source takes a very strong stance on competition. Comparison, they warn, is explicitly the thief of joy.
The competitive desire to surpass or create a better work than another artist. It rarely leads to the transcendent. The energy is one of striving, not openness. Instead, we should redefine this as inspiration as collaboration. True inspiration comes from seeing another artist elevate the bar and aspiring, out of love for the craft, to match it.
The source illustrates this so beautifully with the mid-century music rivalry between the Beatles and the Beach Boys. When Brian Wilson of the Beach Boys first heard the Beatles' Rubber Soul, he famously felt his brain explode. He thought, if I ever do anything in my life, I want it to be as good as that album.
And that surge of happiness and inspiration led him to compose songs like God Only Knows.
Then Paul McCartney hears Wilson's resulting album, Pet Sounds, and has the same explosive reaction, calling God Only Knows the best song ever composed. And encouraged by that, the Beatles listened to Pet Sounds repeatedly while creating the next stage of their music, Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band.
The producer, George Martin, later confirmed that Sgt. Pepper would never have existed in that form without the influence of Pet Sounds. This creative give and take, fueled by mutual affection, is collaboration, a magnificent upward spiral of splendor that benefits everyone.
So the only competition that yields infinite benefits is self-rivalry.
Exactly. This is the desire for continuous evolution and internal progress, not superiority over others. Our capacities, our tastes, our perspectives evolve, and while the work changes, no creation should be considered superior or inferior to another. They're just snapshots of who we are today versus who we were yesterday. Every new creation should be, at that moment, the artist's best creation.
And anchoring this entire mindset is the ultimate internal compass, the orato, which translates roughly to the rapture or the flash.
This is a sudden, sometimes overwhelming internal feeling of harmony or euphoria, a surge of pure energy that surfaces precisely when you're on the right track. It's the compass pointing to your true north. You might be struggling for hours, making slow, painful progress, and then you make one tiny adjustment, a new chord, a subtle shift in tone, a perfect word choice, and suddenly the result just takes your breath away.
You feel magnetized, paralyzed, and you experience the surge of internal certainty, a sense that you've connected to a deeper hidden truth.
The arrebato is the clear mark that you are resonating with the source, and it can manifest in wildly different ways. It might be a powerful, bewildering emotion that shakes your reality, like realizing you've been driving in the wrong direction and now you see the path clearly. Or it can be a relaxed certainty, an internal whisper that simply confirms, yes, this is splendid.
So learning to recognize and trust that feeling, regardless of its intensity, is how the creator knows when they are truly serving the work.
Yes, and that's where it gets really interesting. Understanding those internal signals is crucial to overcoming the obstacles that try to derail us. Let's move now to the practical ways we silence the noise and keep advancing through the toughest parts of Phase 2 and 3.
One of the biggest challenges, of course, is silencing the inner voices. These include the internal critic that parrots "you lack talent" or "the idea isn't good enough," but they also include the external voices, deadlines, sales projections, the need for public approval.
All of it. And the essential skill is learning to disconnect and prevent these pressures from penetrating the creative core. The source offers a profoundly useful tool for dealing with the internal critic rooted in Buddhist psychology, papancha, or mental proliferation.
Papancha.
It's the mind's tendency to respond to any experience, especially fear or novelty, with an avalanche of mental chatter that often exaggerates the situation.
So by labeling your doubt, that's just papancha today, you accomplish two things. You normalize it, and you create distance.
Exactly. You assume that inner chatter is simply a necessary, predictable part of the process, rather than a personal failing that must be eradicated. You acknowledge the thought, label it impersonally, and keep moving forward. This distance is essential because fear never disappears, even for legendary artists.
Right.
The source recalls a legendary singer who had stage fright and intense nausea before every performance for 5 decades, yet still walked on stage every single night and delivered superb shows. Acceptance of the doubt reduces its energy and interference.
It's also crucial to differentiate between two distinct kinds of doubt, because one is productive and the other is paralyzing.
We have to distinguish between doubting the work and doubting oneself.
Yeah.
Doubting the work, asking, is this song as good as it could be, is productive. It leads to the pursuit of excellence. But doubting oneself, saying, I am incapable of writing a good song, or I'm a fraud, is paralyzing. It leads to desperation and a total loss of ability.
So the source notes that when you shift your internal perspective to focus on the work, recognizing the sheer luck of simply being in a position to create can tip the scales toward action. The desire to create has to be greater than the fear of creating.
Another powerful psychological technique the source offers, especially for navigating life setbacks, is detachment and perspective, specifically applied through connected detachment.
Okay, how does that work?
This exercise asks you to imagine momentarily separating yourself from the narrative of your life as challenging events happen. A massive loss, a fire, a job vanishes. As difficult as it sounds, you experience the event as if you're watching a scene in a movie. You observe the dramatic tension, but instead of immersing yourself immediately in the suffering, you ask, I wonder what happens to the protagonist next.
That slight distance is everything, isn't it?
It is. This subtle shift helps maintain equanimity because you never assume one painful experience is the whole story. The difficult times become the necessary context for new possibilities to manifest in the next scene. When we stop obsessing over events, they shrink in importance and stop consuming all our creative energy.
And this detachment also applies to the final work itself. We have to find solace in imperfection. The source makes this fascinating counterintuitive point. Sometimes when you laboriously try to fix an imperfect version that you initially loved, you discover that the new perfect version you created doesn't actually resonate as much.
Right. The secret to a great work is not technical perfection. They offer this apocryphal but highly illuminating guideline. When a work has 5 flaws, it's unfinished. When it has 8 flaws, it might be finished. It's the subtle imperfections, the invented words, the slight rhythmic variations that can become the extraordinary detail that gives the piece its unique personality. The human touch is inherently imperfect.
Now for the most practical takeaways. The specific practical techniques to break blocks, which the source calls exercises. These are designed to reignite the playful illusion of phase 1 and access new forms of expression without worrying about the final result.
The first one is small steps. If a musician or writer is blocked and feeling overwhelmed, the task is simple. Write just one verse or one paragraph per day. It doesn't matter if it's good or bad, as long as the commitment is honored.
And by dividing what seems insurmountable into these small, manageable tasks, the creative channel is reopened and the psychological pressure just vanishes.
And the source notes that the artist often returns to composing entire themes or chapters much faster than expected because they've tricked their critical brain.
Next is change the context. So if a singer is struggling to connect with the emotion of a love song, you can give the lyrics a completely new, counterintuitive backstory.
Right. The song will sound profoundly different if they sing it not to a romantic partner, but to a long-lost friend or their mother. They suggest an exercise where an artist is asked to sing a love song dedicated to a woman as if they were praying to God. You're intentionally using polarity and emotional transference to bypass the analytical brain and find a new, genuine performance.
Then there is altering perspective, using audio cues in a studio setting. One technique involves turning the volume of the musician's headphones up extremely high.
And when the sound bursts into their ears, the natural nervous tendency is to play or sing much more quietly and delicately to restore balance.
And conversely, if you want to encourage a singer to sing louder, you could ask them to lower their vocal volume in the headphones until their voice is completely drowned out, forcing them to increase their projection and energy to hear themselves.
The idea is to design the external environment to naturally favor the aspired, unintended style, without having to give complex verbal instructions.
They also use adding imagery, which bridges the gap between emotion, visuals, and music. They recalled working on an album where a keyboard solo just lacked the right atmosphere. They wanted something more majestic, with more emotional weight.
So instead of giving a musical reference like play it like Beethoven or make it jazzier, they created a detailed emotional scene. They described the landscape after a battle. Imagine a beautiful green hill covered with trees where the battle has just ended. The mountain is still smoking, and wounded soldiers are scattered on the ground waiting for help. Then they simply told the keyboardist, play the solo like that, and recorded it directly. This technique helps define a diffuse melody by translating the intention through a vivid emotional and visual narrative.
And finally, limiting information. When a composer sends a demo to a band, the authors prefer to withhold the composer's specific rhythmic choices, the pre-programmed drums, the bass lines.
Right. Instead, they give the band only the chords and the lyrics. The guitarist and singer interpret the theme with no rhythmic or structural suggestion other than their own natural tendency. This preserves freshness and allows the band's inherent unified rhythm to emerge rather than just copying the preconceived, often stiff, notions of the demo track.
So the point of all these exercises is not to follow them as strict laws, but to offer a temporary structure that forces you to try something different from your usual method and find new ways to keep moving, to tune that psychic musculature we discussed earlier.
Absolutely. And as we move into our final segment, we see how that pure open mindset benefits collaboration and helps define the enduring quality, the very essence of the work itself.
The sources place immense value on cooperation. When we collaborate, we apply multiple prisms to a single idea. The single self's prism reflects one narrow aspect, but cooperation frees up unexpected possibilities.
It's like a jazz band, improvising acting, reacting, and being guided intuitively by the collective energy. And crucially, cooperation must never devolve into competition. The ego, they warn, demands authorship and often rejects new methods simply because it wants to be right or claim ownership.
I see.
Cooperation, conversely, works purely for the best possible result. It's about finding the fastest way to a new perspective, like being boosted over a high wall to immediately see what's on the other side.
So we have to actively reject the error of believing an idea is better simply because it is ours.
That is a hallmark of inexperience. Collaboration thrives on polarity. If two collaborators always agree, one of them is likely redundant. The source compares it to two contrasting color filters overlapping. They produce a new, singular color that neither could create alone. This tension, or creative friction, fuels unique work.
So that friction has to be welcomed and managed.
And communication is key to managing that friction. When giving feedback, we have to avoid descending into the personal. Be hyper-specific and focus exclusively on the work, not the person who created it.
For example,
You say, I think the colors in these two areas clash and distract from the central focus, not, I don't like the colors you chose. And when receiving criticism, we should actively repeat the feedback to the giver. This essential practice helps ensure we didn't misunderstand the critique, especially since language is an imperfect medium.
so if the cooperation works, the resulting creation must be brutally edited to find its essence, its sustaining core.
All complex work rests on a fundamental structure or core identity, like a skeleton supporting the flesh. The essence might be the core theme, the structural integrity, the artist's unique point of view, or a combination of elements that grant the work its vital force and make it uniquely itself.
They use the analogy of a child's drawing of a house. You can remove the window or the door, and it's still clearly a house. But if you remove the roof and external walls, leaving only the door and window, it's no longer recognizable as a house.
Right. The roof and walls are part of the essence. The role of the editor, or the guardian, is brutal but necessary to discard the superfluous until that essence is reached. The goal is not adding for the sake of adding, but improving the density and power of what remains. The editor is the person who protects the work from the artist's own self-indulgence.
The source also connects this essence to harmony. The beauty that moves us is often linked to the invisible threads of mathematical harmony found in nature, the same Fibonacci proportions found in seashells and galaxies, in flowers, and in the human face.
Right. When we achieve these proportions in art, we experience a sense of calm and order. Yet they clarify that not every great work needs to be classically harmonious. Sometimes art seeks to provoke disequilibrium. Dissonance, a conflicting harmony in a song, generates essential tension, and the subsequent resolution attracts attention to an underlying harmony we might have otherwise missed.
Tension is necessary for the relief of resolution.
Mhm. As we approach the end, the sources tackle a common artistic trap, the dilemma of sincerity. Most artists overvalue sincerity, aiming to create their most genuine, heartfelt self-expression.
But the source notes that sincerity is an elusive characteristic. The harder you strive for it, the more it retreats, risking the work sounding cloying or plastic.
So sincerity can't be the primary goal. It is instead a desired side effect.
Art, when approached authentically, reaches deeper than conscious thought. It bypasses our internal walls and looks past the limiting stories we tell ourselves. The art will reflect the sincerity we crave, often in ways the audience understands better than the artist does.
This echoes that profound statement cited in the text by psychologist Carl Rogers. The personal is universal. Our unique, personal, and inevitably imperfect point of view is precisely what gives art its universal relevance. If we just let the art do its work, it will reflect the sincerity we long for.
And the only way to move past the fear of releasing that genuine, often imperfect work is to adopt the abundance mindset.
The source views creative material not as a finite resource, but as a river flowing through us. When we share our ideas and release our work, the supply is replenished by the universal source. If we block that flow hoarding great ideas, fearing to use the best joke on the first album, or striving for perfection indefinitely, the river stagnates. New ideas take longer to appear.
That's the scarcity trap. It leads to creative stagnation and the inability to start the next project.
And the scarcity mindset triggers a kind of universal law. You get what you focus on. If the mind believes it is limited in generating valuable ideas, it becomes incapable of seeing the inspiration the universe is constantly offering. Recognizing abundance means being hopeful that your most brilliant ideas are still undiscovered, and your best work is yet to be manifested. That conviction frees the artist to finish the current work, release it, and immediately move on to the next chapter. The works we create are, at best, chapters in our life's work, not the whole story.
And this abundance mindset leads us directly to the only definition of success that truly matters.
After all this work, the creation, the construction, the brutal editing, the collaboration, the self-doubt, how do we measure success? Is it not popularity or money or good reviews? Those are all variables external to us.
Right.
The success happens in the privacy of the soul.
It arrives the instant you decide to publish the work before you expose yourself to a single opinion.
Exactly. Success is achieved when you have done everything possible to extract the work's full potential, and you are satisfied and ready to let it go. Everything that comes after that quiet sense of duty accomplished, the awards, the sales, the acclaim, depends entirely on uncontrollable external circumstances, the market, distribution, the cultural climate, even a global event that completely overshadows your launch.
If you doubt your inner conviction and try to predict what others might like, your best work will never arrive. The only variables we control are doing the best work possible, sharing it, and starting the next one without looking back.
And this emphasis on internal conviction leads to the ultimate purpose and freedom of the artist. The only responsibility of the artist is to the work itself. You're free to create whatever you desire, even if it's difficult or ugly or strange.
And the world, in turn, is free to the extent that it grants its artists that creative autonomy. Art is essential because there are facets of ourselves, thoughts and feelings too dark or strange to be shared socially, that, when expressed through art, make us feel less alone and more human.
That is the therapeutic power of art. And the reason we are alive, according to the source, is to express ourselves in the world. Art is described as possibly the safest and most beautiful way to send messages through time. A constant human cry. I was here, and this is what I saw.
When we collect to the harmony of the universe, accept the process, and release the work from a place of deep conviction, we're serving a mechanism much larger than ourselves. We are participating in the creation of collective reality.
And that leads us to the final, provocative thought offered by the source, which circles us right back to the very first idea about how we create our own reality.
The final sentence reads, "When you contribute your point of view to the world, others contemplate it too. It refracts through their filter and from there is distributed again. The process is continuous and constant. Together, it creates what we experience as reality." So if your art, your filtered, sincere view of the world, is instantly refracted and redistributed by everyone who consumes it, then perhaps the most important act is not creating the perfect piece, but creating a new piece now. Because the moment you release it, you are already shaping the universal reality that is yet to come. What reality will you create next?
Something potent to ponder until our next deep dive.
Thanks for diving in with us.